Hello, welcome to the human element. My name is Akil. We're going to have a great lesson today. And by lesson, I mean chat. Because homework on the first day of class is not a thing. So, what is the human element? Why am I here? What's going on? Let's wrap it all together. It seems that it's my time to step up. Those who know somewhat know what that means. I am keen in a very general and broad sense. And I'm sophisticated, but I'm like a dull sophisticated. And I wanted to create a space for myself and others to sharpen themselves, sharpen their ability to be, hone in on concrete things to single out, to focus on, to stick to believe in, and invest in, so that they could maximize their time and energy, because the state of the ripples and effects of the energy that is right now is very limiting. And ripples of being challenge the limit factor. But it has to be exercised. It has to be brought out. It has to be challenged. It has to be sought. And I would like to contribute my capacity and vibrance to help create that foundation. Hence the human element, humanity. A lot of problems, a lot of questions as to how the problems could be solved. I have answers to most of those questions. Not all of them, just most of them. Most of those answers technically aren't answers. And one thing I've learned as someone who loves to learn, someone who loves to seek information, certain kinds of information, not traditional kinds, certainly not solely what was presented to me. Otherwise, I would not be able to even bring myself to do this, like seriously. So that part. It's important to bring up simple truths about what's really going on as things are going on, and then to use that as the reference to the actions that you would make. And simple truths in a world full of complexity, they get overwhelmed and overridden. They become blanketed, concealed. Some elements of the concealing is intentional. Others are just sparks and children of that intentional, I guess, counterpart. Probably. I'm that part. I was just going a little extra on. humanity. I mean, if you're gonna have human beings be human beings in a way that's beneficial to human beings, it's important to teach human beings how to be human beings. Okay. And now we can go into how incredibly difficult teaching human beings is. And then if I were to then ask the elements of that difficulty, a multitude of things would come up that span across multiple categories. Like, why is it difficult? And then if you ask people, they would point to different categories. Maybe people would blame people. Maybe people would blame a particular group, a company. Maybe people would point a finger to a concept or a legislation of sorts as a single focal point, or a president, or so on and so forth. And all that really spans across into all these different places that you'd actually might have to individually scroll through yourself to actually even gain some sense, really, of what's going on in reality. So I could say confidently that I don't know what's really going on. And I could also say confidently that I know what's going on. And I could say that because I understand the nuances and how those categories play into my existence. So, if I was to say I don't really know what's going on, I would go to something like my underlying philosophy, which is nature. Things are born, grow, and die again. And the process of growing is a learning and a mastering. And mastering happens as you're being, right? Because you're being, and then after a certain point in your being, you reach a peak of sorts in what your being is capable of doing. And that's why there are cats, they have different personalities, and there are dogs, and they have different personalities. And the existence of the abnormality is even a thing. It's because we don't even know what real is. And that's why abnormal would be abnormal in the first place. So, woven into the structure, there's an element of our reality to where we are not supposed to know what's really going on at some point, right? So at some point, everybody is slammed with the same limit, and I don't want to use the word limit. They're held to the same standard. They're held to the same standard. So they are charged with that capacity to sail beyond that. And that's where things like glory come into existence, and victory and the game and the winning of the game, and if we're thinking about the game, like what game are we thinking about? Well, if we're thinking about any game, we're not thinking about the human game, then what game are we really playing? We're playing a game amidst the game of the complexities of our humanness. So we're really playing ourselves in the highest sense. We're really playing ourselves when we're not playing to the root of what's really going on. And that's why we have investigators and people who get to the bottom of things. and they hold structures together. And there's people who are assigned tasks and responsibilities, and they hold their fort down. We wouldn't be here if it wasn't a constant chain of that happening. And amidst the constant chain of it happening, there was also something amidst the chain that was contributing to the chain continuing to happen. So it's really a balance, because there's an ebb and flow, right? And it's so complex. Like, what is a solution to a problem given the fact that there's a need to increase in the aspects that we've managed to manifest, like our own agreed upon valued manifestations physically. So we all value traditionally currency and funds and the accumulation of something or something that contributes to security. But do we really? I mean, there's so many different kinds of people. And the more human we continue to be without understanding the elements of our humanity, the more we'll continue to play ourselves as we advance with the positive elements of our agreed upon valued manifestations. So we're moving forward and we're increasing these things and we're interacting with these things as if they're not, without understanding the relationship between that thing and how thought and intention and action, certain things had to come together to so how do you do it? I mean, AI, right? AI came, and what happened was what always happens, right? Some people are human and they have their tools and their being and they're navigating the seas. And then there's just a larger chunk of people just, whoa, caught in the waters, being swept away. Very solvable problems. And solvable problems get written off as impossibilities because solvable problems that cause problems for a multitude of people point to a problem that's also benefiting a multitude of people. Benefiting, and we can argue what benefit is and all of the complexities. What does it mean for one to benefit? We don't even know what we want, and that seems to be woven into the structure of things. Okay, so believe it or not, everybody in America essentially, oh, let me dial it back. My word, right? because we have priorities arranged in an order that's suboptimal, we invest our energies in a suboptimal manner, and that creates the appropriate distortions manifesting within our reality. So the things that people tend to say don't make sense make a lot of sense. And they make way too much sense. And things always make sense as I come to find, and I live my life and I talk to people and I listen to them and I hear their stories and I talk to myself and I check my story and I go back and I flip the pages and look at it through different lenses with the new perspectives and lenses of others, because I'm not one to take cover from the truth. Gotta get to the root. If you're not pulling from what's really going on and acting off of it, then what are you acting off of? And if you're desiring to act off of concrete things, it makes sense to invest your energy into finding concrete things. Like really work for it, you know? Don't go to sleep tonight. Tell yourself that you fixed your problem and then just stop looking. Because revision is part of the process. You have to see how you span across categories. Like me, I came through many portals to get here. Recently, too. Just a one person in one particular chunk of time and another in a particular chunk of time. And people do this every day. It's a regular experience, that's a magical experience, that's understated as a magical experience. And there's magical experiences that happen every day that's very normal, that are understated as magical experiences. And because of that, the proper energy isn't invested to the actions present to make it so. And so we come here depressed, suppressed, and oppressed. Some of us. And that creates a hindrance on the process that facilitates true growth. And true growth is true growth. If you're getting stronger in the categories that are relative to you and your projections, I would say, there's so much of common sense that's woven into humanity. It's things that they don't need to be expounded upon. And I will definitely be getting into that. I would love to break down the myriad of categories that I can jump into and take apart and pull it wide until it's transparent, and maybe I'll rip it apart. I'm not a fan of veils. They make it harder for me to do my job, which is solve the problem. Okay, so I demonstrate I have intelligence to someone and that I have the ability to jump across categories to pull out something that's meta and make it so in real time. So they get they feel the presence of something. whatever their conceptualizations of the experience are, they feel it. Now, the conceptualizations play a part depending on whether they have it and whether they have it and they're invested in it and how invested in it they might be. That all impedes on the process. But if you're just someone who's one person in one state and someone spans across categories and picks from all of them to hand deliver you one specialized cart of meta knowledge for your particular situation so that you could be better, which is better for everybody. Because you live, and the longer you live, the more actions you take. And if you knew how to be better earlier, the quality of your actions would be better earlier. So yeah, do you have the choice and are manifested in a reality to where it's made extremely easy to choose every other route but that choice? To take the path? Yeah. But understand that the game is rigged. And a lot, I would say most of us come wired in a way to know that things are rigged. It's just people need help. People need a hand. And people need signals and cues. And that makes sense. We're wired to look to society for cues of stability and pillars. And the funny thing is, if you don't see a person being a particular way, you won't take it as a cue to be a particular way. And that reality that you confront every day will affect you, whether or not you're eating good mental food and keeping your diet clean. If you're getting hit with life, you gotta weather the storm. But you gotta weather the storm, and there is benefit to doing that with a certain spirit. If you could be a certain way when you're weathering the storm, and if you can't be that certain way, if you could imagine being that way while you're going through that storm, or encourage yourself to set that standard in some way as valuable, and replace that value with something else that maybe you considered something to invest your energy towards, you would receive the fruit of that domain. In my next video, I will be going into domains, the territories, categories. It's going to be great. I will be opening with the Universal Declaration of Human Rights. I have the whiteboard here. Am I going to use it? Probably not. I wanted to keep this at 30 minutes. This is the Human Element, my first edition. Just wanted to talk about what I'm going to be doing. It's the Human Element, baby. The Human Element. Yeah, yeah, yeah. The Human Element. I am a feeling being. I've come to find I have all these things that are in common with a certain sect of people. I, up until recently, didn't even give the concept of having a tribe any validity. I didn't see it as a reliable concept to put my hope in, given how I've lived my life, which is essentially in a way that highlights my desire for self-sufficiency. And because I've lived my days with that desire, I've found different ways of my own to create that for myself in the categories that I can manifest that in. But man, a couple of years ago, I had to step out of my box, you know? Started getting hit with all these lower inclinations, thinking about why things matter, what's the point? Or not in the grand sense, just my efforts in my particular struggle. It's maybe a little bit of both. It's tough to deal with those kinds of struggling with your own experience, trying to find your perception of it to be proven false. Because if you could prove it false, then when you pick that apart, you can pick apart other problems that have a similar theme to that thing. And that would make you a very capable person. There seems to be an element of, I'm not going to give it a name. There's an element of something that I was born into, my parents were born into, and their parents were born into. And it inhibits the human element, essentially. And then it's because we're like adolescents or children. I mean, in a grand sense, you know, as far as mastery of self. In the collective sense, majority of people, I don't know, adolescent might be given way too much credit. Maybe, but I would love to say that we're at the adolescent phase. And we're having some sort of puberty at the moment. That would be, seems to me to be accurate from my personal experience now. But man, the way worlds can just switch when you just aim different and pull out energy from one place and invest it in another, and you do that, right? Humanity, human. What's the problem? The problem is we have human problems, and we're not solving it like humans. The problem is we have human problems, and we're not solving it as problems. The problem is a lot of people who seek to know what the problem is think that they can ultimately single it down to one thing. And I'm here to say, you can. You definitely can single everything down to one thing. What is the problem? What is the problem? Well, the problem is that we think that we can slack on embodiment. I mean, embodiment and encouraging other people to embody is the kind of thing that would prevent everybody from coming to the conclusions that they would have came to, right? Because there are multiple points in life, canon events, right, that everyone has, to where if a certain kind of person was being a certain kind of way, and they weren't suppressed, oppressed, depressed, actually able to be, then they would be able to exhibit something that confirms to another member of the family in the ultimate sense, that there is something working in their society. So people come here, some of them, and they're like, something's not working. And you know, not everybody can be a pizza boy. I don't want everyone to single their focus on one cause, to single down on really one action. Because if you, like I said before, it can be singled down to one thing, and that thing is an embodiment. But an embodiment is a sustained mode of being that creates right action as its being. And right action is right results. But you have to be and sustained being. Sustained being isn't even a thing that's being encouraged as a concept. Like, okay, you're up one moment and you're down the next. But man, that's education has failed. But it's failed because it's always failed. Because there was always an underlying element of some sort of intellectual art being concealed or withheld from the public. And those arts are in the humane sense the right of the people. Like people who deal with people and walk the path, even if they don't come across books like the Bible or the Quran or the Torah, they wind up embodying a certain mode of sustained being that has actions that are in alignment and codes of ethics that are in alignment and concepts that they stick to that are in alignment with these books. So is religion necessary? Well, that's a subjective question. Do you need it? How do you know if you need it or not? If you don't come in contact with it and embrace it with all that you have. But then how do you ever extract anything that you really need from anything when you interact it if you don't know how to embrace that thing with who you are? Don't know, or maybe you're depressed, so you're not motivated to. Or maybe you're oppressed, so you're definitely afraid to. Or maybe you're suppressed, so you just won't. Maybe you're all of them. And that's what the human element is about. I am a very confident man, but I'm confident internally. And I've been called out to be. So I'll end with this. The human element. People don't come out saying that they have solutions. Well, actually they do. I'm sorry. But a solution to the problem overall. And actually, people know the solution. There's enough of people who know what it is scattered amongst us that could come together to just put pieces amidst all the other people who play the actual parts, to just plug in their pieces. And we solve the problems that need to be solved instead of investing our energy into a structure of value that's immature, because as human beings at the top of our food chain, forgetting why we're at the top of the food chain is not because of our physicality, but is our ability to think. And thinking is an abstraction, which means abstracting is a means to, was the most critical means to our survival overall, spanning through the categories. Abstraction. So abstraction in the early stages, and it makes a lot of sense. Things that don't make sense actually do. You need to survive. You're at your lowest state. At going to dialing the time back, we just spawned. We had to figure things out. And figure things out we did. And figure things out, and then we got better at figuring things out, and then got better at letting other people know the things that we figured out. And if it wasn't that way, we would have never been here. And if we can do all of that in an open world full of nothingness, conquer it, and end up in a timeline like now, where does optimism come from? Why believe in life? Well, you're here. You're not doing the math. The math is, at some point there was a race of people who were incredibly incapacitated as far as their ability to protect themselves. So they essentially had to be and die and be and die and be and die. And the beings that of those times had to analyze those deaths to figure out what was the underlying cause of the beings dying. How could you know? You just spawned. And we're in this time now where things of old are recorded and they're available and they're accessed. It's the greatest time to be alive. It would be a great, magnanimous time felt amongst people if they were being in the best time to be alive. Because people aren't being in the best time to be alive. They're being in this construct. And I have to wrap this up. I'm sorry. The human element. People who are not in their right mind. And what do we even mean when we're saying right mind? Like, what does that mean when I say you're not in your right mind? Obviously, there's a mind that's either wrong or a mind that's less right than the right mind, or a combination of the two. Maybe there's a whole system that we're not uncovering that needs to be talked about, and people have these pieces. I mean, something like that would be why I would make the human element, which seems to be an obvious type of structure to invest energy towards as far as the whole of people is concerned, because all people are people. And if we could all come together to figure out how to be better people, then we could activate the people who aren't really being at the capacity that's even possible for them and just possible in general. When you're not in your right mind, there's a timeline, right? You think about the butterfly effect. Okay, so you know that there's a concept of the right mind. If you start here from your right mind and you go on, I mean, all of those actions, they would produce things that would stabilize and solidify and transfer all through just time and all the beings that it needs to transfer to, all that right-mindedness or all the right actions. It'd be something like the right timeline. And then if you're born, like, people come born saying certain things and they all point to a particular theme, right? If we were born in our right mind and like the collective was operating in that capacity, actually being the human element, actually being the embodiment. If you want to say there's one solution, it's the embodiment. But if you're embodying something, what are you embodying and how do you embody? Well, we're going to have to get a little bit beyond rational and intellect and all of those basic things and reading from books and words like that. It's not enough to solve the problem. And, that's the beauty of having different kinds of people in different kinds of categories. And also the beauty of the fact that we've never even had the capacity to connect ourselves and converge all these elements and piece them together amongst ourselves. I mean, growth is happening. It's happening right now. It's the greatest time to be alive. But where are you at? I'm not always in my right mind, guys. I'm going to be picking myself apart throughout this whole human element spiel. Should I call it a spiel? Rant series that I'll be doing. And then you have, and you're not right mind. And I feel like, given the theme of the things that people say and the questions that they ask and the things that they crave to know that continually aren't answered. So, pointing to the theme of the questions that are particularly being asked of anything. Like, what is the question? Like, what are you asking? You're asking, what is the problem? Okay, so right there, that right there is an element of something. And I would say it would fall under the category of not in the right mind. Or what do you mean there's not a problem? Well, it depends, right? Because how do you handle that, I guess, would be whether or not you're in the right mind and whether or not throughout the timeline you're operating in the right timeline, because the right mind is essentially the difference between the two is how are you handling things. It's not the time across the actions, and obviously there's a distinction between actions. So everything we're doing now hasn't made it better than it was when we were already thinking it was getting worse. Okay, so drop everything. Mostly, like, what are we doing? Now we have to know. The human element, I would like it to be where people who are like myself, who are powerful, who are mainly just either oppressed, suppressed, depressed, to where we can find stabilized concepts, ideals, morals, to invest our energy into it wholeheartedly after a series of narrowing down other things, process of elimination, to increase our faith in the thing that we're investing our energy towards, despite the fact that it may differ from things that other people are doing. Fortifying us as we start to keep going along, because that's the process of starting in the first place. If you start in your right mind, if you start with the right spirit, if you operate in the right capacity, if you aim to do so, if you have a genuine aim to do so. And eventually that leads to you doing something different, because if you're seeking to be in your right mind and you're finding elements that are breaking you down, you're truly dying as people in your life are being, and they're bringing into you elements of other categories that point to your ultimate solution for you personally. You're dying as that's happening. The death that's happening makes you so happy. You're alive through that death. That's the greatest. That's the death that people are trying to get. They just want to die. Of course you want to die if you're oppressed, suppressed, and depressed, but you don't want to die a physical death because you're not physically bound. And that's what I mean by the human element. So when we start at the problem, we start in our thought processes, investing our energy towards a certain train of thoughts. I mean, if you were in your right mind, as soon as you start that train, I promise you, being a master of the universe would not be a far-fetched idea. It would not be. If you can just start in your right mind, if you can see someone starting in their right mind, coming out of it, struggling with it, championing it through the way, and you're like, nah, I can do this. After a while, right? And what else could you possibly want? And think about how many other people are possibly pining for that same kind of death. And the theme across of it, because the problem, it spans across categories and it manifests in different ways, but it comes from the same source. And the source of the problem is a construct of a human element. It's a construct of a human element. And if we don't know how to be humans, how can we identify the element of the human that it's coming from and pinpoint it and solve the problem? I mean, we do diagnosis on a physical level. And when it comes to the human element, it has to be a new kind of thought. It has to be much more simply sophisticated. And to be simply sophisticated, you have to have a certain kind of heart. Really. You really do. I come to find. Apparently, like me posting this, because I'm going to post it and I'm going to continue on doing this in faith, knowing, like I know right now that I'm going to start something. What it is and how it's going to turn into, that's my joy of uncovering with all the other people who will be uncovering things and becoming masters of the universe simply by becoming more human, not by aiming suboptimally at elements of something that points to the embodiment of the highest power. If you're a fish and you're embodying something that's not a fish, you're not embodying your highest power. And what does that matter? I mean, it doesn't even really matter. But that means you can't operate in your highest functions and your most natural capabilities. So as an organism, because that's the I'm going biological with it. So as an organism, you're just extremely limited. But it's a good thing fish don't have to deal with abstractions, right? So fish don't have to because of their mental capacity, have to deal with the, like, growing up with dogs and thinking they can run. I mean, do they get eaten on a scale and hunted on a scale that is absolutely incredible? Yes. Pros and cons. I want to operate from my right mind. I want to be in my right mind. I've been called to, although I feel I am not at my level of solidification and maturity and capacity to do this very job. The evidence says that I am. So I'll just keep going. And on that, starting from my right mind, I guess I'll actually bring this to a close. Thank you to the teachers who taught me, the people being people who had their morals and their ethics that are long-standing and had to be long-standing for us all to be here. A society of people carried on the backs of the people who are most people-like, most humane. Because otherwise, how could things sustain? When people lose their aim and invest energy to things to their dismay. I mean, it's a repetitive cycle. This is the time. This is the time to do our work, and not the work that's been assigned and advertised to us, because we're advertised aims. And that's why people come seeking aims, because it's interesting how we're painted as these incapable beings, but we're thrust into this world, and so many things are happening, but we have these senses. We have these senses, and constant numbers of people, even though I'm not taking survey, just experiences and other people who know what I'm talking about dealing with people. Constant amount of people thrust into an array of nonsense, and somehow they come to a point to where it's just something's not right. This is nonsense. And then from being trapped, not only in the fact that they're in a place that they don't even know, but a place that's possibly filled with way more powerful and skilled and intentful actions. And somehow just realizing that it's not enough and then aiming to move away from that. I hope I did a good job of going way past my half-hour mark to explain the human element. And I didn't really feel like I taught anything, but at least I wrote something on the board, right? It's closing time. And like I said, the next time I will be talking about domains, the relative and the absolute. And as I go forward, people will find that I have answers. People will find that when they find these answers, they have work to do. So if you're called to seek to the answers that lift suffering on your life, at least play out burning. You're gonna have to burn for it. Man, I love you guys. I can't wait to talk to the men about the nature of how we've been sabotaged. Lay it out in excruciating detail and point to the aim that I believe is most beneficial. Not the aim, but a set of aims that I believe are beneficial to invest amidst all of the sabotage that's present amongst humans being human. Intentional, not intentional, doesn't matter. This is about ideal, ethic, moral. This is about a demonstration. This is about my evolution, me stepping into my power, me setting things right for myself in the ultimate way. In my mind, as I encourage others to do, this is the best way to create the best way. Do I know the best way? No. Do I have a concrete idea on the actions that will bring about us knowing the best way? 100%. And I'm not the only one. And if you really believe that and you really understand that and you really take that on, what you have is responsibility and you have work to do, and it's not the one you've been assigned, and it's not the one you've been thrust into doing. It's a different kind of work. And you need to do that too. And I would argue that you need to value that so much that you shave off time from those other investments of energy to create about something that creates actual order. investing in actions that are based off of what you have extracted to be true and eliminated as not true over time. I love you. My name is Akil. This is the Human Element. Enjoy yourself. I hope if you were like washing dishes or something, or like walking, I hope I did something for you. Okay? All right. Yeah. See you next time, guys. Bye bye.